The Canon R50 and R50V are completely different cameras, and the differences are massive and go way beyond simple things like C-log, shooting speed, or design. But one camera isn't better than the other, and they're actually made for a similar type of shooter. So the question is, which camera is right for you? To answer this, I did a massive deep dive with side-by-side comparisons to help you pick the right one. Also, I'll leave links down below with the best pricing on both cameras. Now let's start this video off with the part that most people think are the same in these two cameras, and that's the sensor. On the surface, both cameras do have a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor. However, you might be surprised to find that the results this sensor produces in each camera are wildly different. 90% of the reason you buy a Canon camera are the Canon colors. Canon is known for having very warm, saturated colors with really good skin tones. But comparing the Canon R50V and the R50 side by side, I actually found that the colors are very different. The R50 is much punchier, much warmer, and much more saturated, where the R50V is a little bit muted, a little bit more contrasty, and a more filmic approach to color science. And the way skin looks is also very different. When shooting both cameras in Rec. 709, which is the standard picture profile in video, the Canon R50 is slightly more vibrant, more saturated, and also warmer. But in HDR-PQ mode with 10-bit color, the Canon R50 is again warmer, punchier, and more saturated compared to the Canon R50V. In C-Log 3 versus HDR-PQ mode or Rec. 709, the difference is night and day. The two cameras look completely different. The Canon R50 has more of a mainstream color profile, where the Canon R50V has more of a cinematic look. In photo mode, the two cameras are much closer, but the blues are still very different, and the skin tones are still much warmer in the Canon R50. Now, having different colors in these cameras doesn't make one better than the other, but rather who these cameras are for. I actually think it's a really good thing that Canon changed the colors in the Canon R50V, and I'll explain why later on in the video section where it makes more sense. But it's too early to make your decision just yet. Now, there are two similarities between these cameras that I think you guys will appreciate. First up is the autofocus. It works super well, plus it has AI subject detect for animal, people, and cars, and it's basically perfect for the type of person this camera is made for. And the stabilization is also the same in these two cameras. You get pretty decent results, but the stabilization at maximum does crop into your image pretty heavily, giving you a much tighter shot, which is the perfect transition to talk about the lenses on these cameras. The Canon R50 has an 18 to 45mm lens, which gives you a pretty decent wide shot and a very decent tight shot as well for portraits. The R50V, however, has a 14mm lens, which is significantly wider. However, when zooming in, you can only go to 30mm, which isn't the ideal focal length for portraits, but it's good for like a chest up talking head shot. Now, one thing that will matter to someone that's traveling with their lens are the lens sizes. In default mode, when your camera's off, the R50 lens is actually pretty small. But to use it, you actually have to twist open this lens, which dramatically increases the size, and it also changes sizes when zooming in and out. Now, this is actually a good thing, because when the camera's packed away, it takes up less space. The Canon R50V lens, however, is actually a power zoom that you can either gently twist on the actual lens to zoom in and out, and the lens does not change sizes, or there's a zoom rocker on the front that you can gently toggle to zoom in and out. Now, you guys are probably waiting for me to talk about the technology inside of these cameras, and the two cameras are very different, and we both know that one camera is newer with fancier tech. However, temper your expectations, because depending on what you shoot and how you like to shoot, the spec bump may not be that big of a deal. Both cameras are great photo cameras, can shoot anywhere between 12 to 15 frames per second, depending on if you're shooting first current electronic shutter or just plain old electronic shutter. But the R50 can shoot 46 JPEGs in a row. However, it can only shoot 7 raw photos in a row, where the R50V can shoot 96 JPEGs in a row and 36 raw photos. And that's a pretty massive difference. But if you're mainly a JPEG shooter and you're only shooting photography for fun and you're not planning on editing it later, you won't care about the upgrade in raw performance. And in that case, you could probably get away with the Canon R50. And another thing you guys should know is that the Canon R50 also has automatic plus mode, which uses computational photography, kind of like a cell phone, to combine multiple images together to get the best possible results. But both cameras do have something known as creative assist, where you simply tell the camera how much brightness you want, how much contrast, what kind of color tone, how much background blur, and the camera will automatically do all the settings for you. Now, when it comes to video, the difference is massive. And you guys have already seen the difference in color when it comes to video, but the R50 overall just always has a more saturated, warmer, and punchier look straight out of camera, and the R50V has more of a cinematic, movie-like look with more muted but more contrasty colors. And there's actually a really good reason why Canon made this change. The Canon R50 in standard Rec 709 shooting mode, which is just straight out of the camera with no settings applied, it only shoots 8-bit color. And this is fine for just casual video, but if you want to do any kind of color tweaking or color grading, it's not a good choice. And if you want 10-bit color, you have to go into HDR-PQ mode, which still is kind of limited in some ways, but the Canon R50V in standard Rec 709 does shoot in 10-bit 422 color, which is better for color grading and tweaking the look of your video. Plus, it also shoots in a much higher video codec, which is a type of video file that's better for editing and color grading. Because the Canon R50V is meant to be a camera where you shoot your video, do a lot to it, edit it into something before you share it or post it somewhere. So having more neutral or more cinematic colors actually makes the color grading process easier and also aligns better with the taste of that type of user. And the R50V also has C-Log 3 in 10-bit color, which has way more dynamic range and more flexibility, so you can really treat the R50V like a proper content creation or cinematic camera. So you might be thinking, I'll get the R50 if I don't want to do any kind of color grading or editing, and I'm lazy, and I'll get the R50V if I plan to do a lot to my color grading and do something cinematic. That's kind of right, but also not. Because Canon still wants you to check out their new camera, so they've also added stylized looks right in camera that bake into your footage, and you can get a cool color graded look without any work, but you can also add your own custom LUT and bake it right into the footage, and that's very little work, so you don't have to get the R50 just because you don't want to edit. On top of that, the R50V also has something known as cinematic view that adds the black bars to the top and bottom of your footage for a more cinematic aspect ratio. Now, these cameras do have a lot of similarities when it comes to video, so don't just think the R50V is better right off the bat. Both cameras can shoot 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second. That's also downsampled from 6K, giving you 6K detail and clarity, but in a smaller 4K file that's easier to edit. And the R50V can also shoot 4K at 60 frames per second, but it does come with a pretty heavy crop and it's not downsampled. Now, if you're someone that does want to shoot slow motion, you can shoot full HD up to 60 frames per second with no crop or compromise, and both cameras can also shoot 120 frames per second in full HD. So it's not about which camera is better and which one's going to impress your friends, but rather which camera is right for you and the way you like to shoot. And nothing says which camera is right for you more than design, because the design of these cameras is totally different. The real reason they made the Canon R50V wasn't so they had a new camera to sell you, well, kind of, but mostly because a lot of people complained about the Canon R50 overheating, and the R50V fixes all of those overheating issues. I personally have never had the Canon R50 overheat on me, but I also live in Canada, so it depends on where you live. But if you were worried about overheating, this is now fixed with the R50V, and that was one of the biggest reasons they made this camera. On top of that, one thing I've heard from a lot of people is that the R50V has a worse screen on the back. They both have a side articulating screen that's touch sensitive, but putting both screens side by side, you can hardly tell the difference. The original R50V screen is slightly brighter, slightly sharper, but if you look at them side by side, you really cannot see the difference. And the original R50 does have a really nice electronic viewfinder, which is fantastic for photography, and a built-in flash, which a lot of photographers, especially beginners, appreciate. One major change they made to the R50V that a lot of people complained about from the R50 was that all of the HDMI ports and the USB ports were on the right side of the camera where you hold the camera, and that usually got in the way of you holding it. On top of that, there was a microphone jack on the left side, but there was no headphone jack. The R50V now moves everything to the left side of the camera so it doesn't get in the way of you holding the camera, but it now also has a headphone jack, and on top of that, the screen does not hit the microphone jack when you're turning it. In my opinion, the R50V has solved a lot of design issues. Even better, the R50V now has a tripod mount on the right side of the camera for vertically mounting your camera for shorts and vertical video, which I know a lot of you guys will love. And there's even more changes. The Canon R50 has a pretty basic button layout that's nice. I like it, it's great for beginners, but it only has a mode dial with mostly automatic settings, a single front dial, and a D-pad on the back for navigations, but it does have two separate buttons for photo and video capture. The R50V now has a mode dial with custom profiles, slow and quick mode, a video mode, a dedicated photo mode, and only one automatic setting, because they've put all the more advanced modes directly on the mode dial for easy access. And there's also a zoom rocker if you're using the power zoom lens, and there's a single command dial on the back of the camera. But the D-pad on the back of the camera is now also a scroll wheel that makes navigation through menus much faster. And there's also a dedicated button to switch between your standard colors, color filters, and C-Log profile. And there's also a separate dedicated button for turning on connections like wireless live streaming, USB streaming, and connecting directly to your phone wirelessly. Which leads me to my most important point in this video, and that is, who are these cameras for? A lot of people on YouTube are saying the R50 is for photos, the R50V is for video, and that's kind of a surface level answer, and most of that narrative comes from the Canon marketing. No shade on Canon, you gotta market your cameras, but I think that's not entirely accurate. A better and more honest way of thinking about it is that the Canon R50 is a beginner, simple camera for people that are not creatives and not artists. And I'm not trying to like throw shade, you don't have to be a creative or artist, but most of the modes on this camera's mode dial are automatic modes, because this is a camera where everything is done for you. You're just trying to have fun with this. Maybe you're a dentist, maybe you're a lawyer, maybe you're just a mom that wants to capture her kids on the weekend, and maybe you're trying to do something artistic with it, but this really isn't the camera for that. The R50V, however, is an artist camera. This is for someone who's a creator. This is for someone that really wants to get into the nitty-gritty of everything with their camera and really create something and not just have everything done for you. Even the mode dial on this camera is custom profiles. That really goes to show you that this camera was made by the engineers for creatives and people that want to go deep with their camera. The Canon R50V does not hold your hand. The Canon R50, however, holds your hand every step of the way. You literally can't take a bad photo with it. Now, the one thing that might be stopping photographers from picking up the R50V is the lack of viewfinder and in-body flash. In that case, you should check out the Canon R10. It's basically this camera, but in a photo-centric body. I personally prefer the R50V over the R50. The body alone of the R50V is actually cheaper than the body alone of the R50, and with the lenses, they're about the same price, with maybe a difference of about $40 to $50. So if you want to check out these cameras and find the best prices for them, check out the links down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.